Maybe what I really want is to be one of these Asian girls.
Bing! The moment when the West realized that many trans women have a fetish.
Am I a middle-aged white guy on the inside too?
Yes. Hey everyone, it is Jack. Welcome back to my channel, or if you are new, hello, welcome to the family. Well, I saw a video today from White Lotus and I just had to come on here and talk about it. Now, I'm a big fan of White Lotus. I've watched the first 2 seasons. I think it is absolutely hilarious. And I've not watched the 3rd one, but I'm very much looking forward to doing that. A very strange and curious scene has propped up on White Lotus, which I know loyal viewers of my channel will be very intrigued by and know exactly what's going on there. Now in this video, we see a man talking about his peculiar sexual desires, and it is very apparent to me, who has been balls deep in the trans conversation for the past 2 years, on what is going on here. Ray Blanchard actually tweeted this on his X account saying, since 2003, political activists and their allies have done everything they could to prevent the word and the concept of autogynephilia from entering public awareness. And yet, with excruciating slowness but apparent inevitability, it is doing just that. Now, if you don't know what autogynephilia is, well, trust me, you're in store for a treat.
Where am I going with this? Why do I feel this need to fuck all these women? What is desire? The form of this cute Asian girl, why does it have such a grip on me? Because she's the opposite of me? Is she gonna complete me in some way? I realized I could fuck a million women, I'd still never be satisfied. Maybe what I really want is to be one of these Asian girls.
Bing! So we see there the autogynephilia creeping out. Now, if you are not new to my channel, you will know exactly what this is. So sorry, I'm going to bore you for a second if you don't. Ray Blanchard is a sexologist who established in the 1980s that there are largely 2 buckets of motivations when it comes to males transitioning to quote unquote live as women. One is homosexual men, people like me who are very feminine and typically suffered a lot of abuse and also are so feminine that gay men are not attracted to them and therefore can attract different partners after transitioning. So that's one type. Then we have the autogynephile who has a sexual attraction towards himself as a woman, and it causes all sorts of problems. We see that a lot of these men are quite narcissistic. They force women to give them access to their spaces, even though they are attracted to women themselves. And we see the concept here coming up of the envy desire, because they have simultaneously that desire for women, but also this peculiar envy of women and the fact that they actually on some level want to be them. And what's interesting with this is that it becomes increasingly more and more progressive, which is why we see so many men driven towards genital mutilation, taking harmful sex hormone drugs. And this is clearly seen in this video.
Really?
Really?
You know?
Not really.
No, really.
Really?
So,
Does he have the autogynephile stare?
one night I took home some girl, turned out to be a lady boy, which I'd done before, but this time, instead of fucking the lady boy fucked me. And it was kind of magical.
You know, what's funny here is that when you first tell anyone what autogynephilia is, that's the kind of face they have. They're like, what? But then it's at the same time, it makes sense because they go, oh, right. That's what's going on there with that really masculine man wearing a wig saying he's always been a woman. So many people just don't see 2 things adding up there until you describe what autogynephilia is. And when you can't understand a man's behavior, it's usually sexual. When you can't understand why he's doing obscene things, it's usually because of sex. Let's face it. I have compassion for some guys that have AGP, especially those who speak about it publicly and don't transition and find a way to actually manage it and live happily. So I don't think it is just you have that and you're destined to be a horrible person, but it causes a lot of issues because your desire is to be the thing you desire most. So then you require all of the world to validate this fantasy of yourself as a woman in order for you to be happy. It's a losing battle because most women will not see this masculine man as a woman. So you can really see the pin drop. And another thing with autogynephilia is there seems to be this fascination with being emasculated. They love the concept of sissification, which is sort of being forced to feminize yourself. They like watching the sissy hypno porn where men are sort of debased and turned into women. It's a whole thing, and it is quite disturbing.
And I got in my head what I really wanted was to be one of these Asian girls getting fucked by me and to feel that.
That's just the classic telling someone what autogynephilia is face. That needs to be enshrined somewhere. Like the moment when the West realized that many trans women have a fetish. That moment in history. And it's so interesting that Ray Blanchard has been talking about this since the 80s. I was talking to someone about this recently, and they said that someone they know, who they know, that kind of thing, just out of nowhere announced to his wife and kids that he's a woman and is now dressing in really sexual outfits, making everyone call him a woman. And the family are naturally really struggling from this narcissistic abuse. Simultaneously, everyone is just so confused because this is a man who never showed any outward signs of femininity, is still not successfully portraying femininity in his scantily clad outfits. And I think that confusion is really damaging because it's what the activist charities have done, the institutional capture, that it forces you to believe this is a civil rights movement to allow a man to live out his sexual fantasy. That is why the trans activist movement has been so damaging, because it's latched itself on to gay people. It's just not the same thing. We also have a sexuality, but it is far easier for us to integrate our sexuality to a prosperous life, provided we're not abused and attacked by people, because it's possible to be with another man. For me as a man to be with another man, it's not possible to become the other sex. So it causes all sorts of issues. And even though it still is sort of a fringe online issue, I have seen a real change, even since I started talking about this in the discourse around autogynephilia, because you had even JD Vance talking about it on a podcast. You had Elon Musk talking about it on a podcast. If I do watch right-wing media in the UK, you have journalists and people just openly talking about it, saying what the name is. I do think that this is going to start coming out more and more, and I'm very curious to see how Pink News and Stonewall and all the activist charities deal with it.
So I put out an ad looking for a white guy, my age, come over and fuck me. Found a guy looked a lot like me.
So creepy.
Then I put on some lingerie and perfume, made myself look like one of these girls. And I thought I looked pretty hot.
That's another sign, is that I think the desire is so strong that they sort of gaslight themselves into thinking that they look classy, when it's just a full-grown man with a beard, no femininity about him, putting on some skimpy lingerie, and they always look absolutely tragic. I'm sorry, but a lot of the autogynephiles, at least when they first start transitioning, are very hopeless looking, but the community all validate each other and say, oh my God, no, you're beautiful, you pass. He thought he looked great, but I would guess that he probably didn't.
And then this guy came over and railed the shit out of me. And then I got addicted to that. Some nights 3, 4 guys would come over and rail the shit out of me. Some I even had to pay.
So you see the progressive nature of it, because this desire to become a woman is never satiated. You always have to keep chasing it. And that's why it starts from wearing some lingerie, masturbating, to then actually seeking out sexual partners that will allow you to, pretend you're a woman and feel like a woman. And then that stops doing enough for you. And eventually you become so attached to this vision of yourself as a woman that you want to go out into the world and be this person. Eventually it becomes less sexual, and you want to become this alter ego of yourself. You want to take harmful cross-sex hormone drugs and remove your penis to satisfy that desire. It is a reality that they will never achieve. They're never going to pass. Most of them can't even fake femininity. It causes lots of issues in society. Women don't want to put up with it. Some of them think this will make them happy, but actually it's just a never-ending chase that they never get to the end of. They never catch the carrot. It's just a constant stick. Love a good metaphor.
And at the same time, I'd hire an Asian girl to just sit there and watch the whole thing. I'd look in her eyes while some guy was fucking me, and I'd think, I am her, and I'm fucking me.
I mean, they couldn't make it more creepy. And I can really see how women find this so uncomfortable. You know, it's sort of easier for gay men to write this off, and straight men actually, because they don't have as much skin in this game as women do. But, you know, if I imagine a female who has a fetish towards being a gay man, and lots of them do who transition, I find that quite icky. I find the thought of them just kind of fetishizing this idea of being a gay man icky, but it's not as threatening for me as it would be for a woman in the other way. I think it's far worse. And when you learn, for some autogynephiles, their idea of a woman is just this kind of slut that's being debased, then of course it's going to make you uncomfortable. And of course you're not going to want those men in your spaces, in your sports, in your changing rooms, in your rape crisis centers. It's just absolute common sense. I love the intensity of this scene. Speechless.
Hey, we all have our Achilles heel, man, you know. Where does it come from?
Not really.
Why are some of us attracted to the opposite form? Yeah, and some of us the same. Sex is a poetic act. It's a metaphor. Metaphor for what? Are we our forms? Am I a middle-aged white guy on the inside too?
Yes. And this is why educating guys on their autogynephilia is so important. And actually, I think it can help with all the dysphoria, because they realize they're not actually a woman. They just have this sexual desire. And then it leads them on this spiritual, metaphorical path because they're so confused. And then it's, oh, well, am I really a man on the inside? Yes. You know, you're male, you're a man. That's never going to change. You know, build a bridge, get over it. Build a bridge, get over it.
Or inside, could I be an Asian girl?
No.
Right. I don't know.
You know, the answer is no. Access denied to the Asian girl. The sooner people learn to accept it, I feel like things can only get better. And there may be a part of you that always feels sad that you'll never be that woman. And I do have compassion for that. You know, if you don't harm women, it must be unbearable for your sexual attraction to be something that's never attainable. If I try and relate to it in some way, and the gays get really annoyed when I do this, but I sort of liken it a little bit to if I was born in a time when there was just no chance I could be public about my homosexuality, and I would have to marry a woman and have kids and never be able to be truthful to myself and to have what I desire. I know they're not the same thing, but that is how I kind of can try and get my head inside it. Because if I had to live as a straight guy, marry a woman and have kids, and always have this burning desire to be with men, but never being able to satiate that desire, that would be really depressing and really infuriating. You can see why some of them find themselves in like a hopeless depression where they think transition is the only solution. It's going to make them happy. But while in my case, just being able to be with another man kind of solves the issue, removing the stigma towards trans, it doesn't work because they can't attain that desire no matter how hard they try. People hate when I try and have compassion towards autogynephilia, but the reality is that there are autogynephiles who are good people, who don't want to harm people, who don't even believe in gender ideology, and whose lives are kind of miserable. It's a sad reality for them, because getting therapy and learning that you have autogynephilia and that there's a higher percentage of men that have it than we think, that's all well and good. And I think it can probably have good outcomes for a lot of them. But I do acknowledge that there's probably a portion of them who will just always be kind of miserable about it. They'll always have that burning desire that can never be satisfied. Now, there are worse things in the world. You know, you could be at war, you could be starving. You know, it really is a kind of problem of abundance, if you know what I mean. I mean, in the past, when we didn't let men get away with this behavior, who knows how many men would have been thinking about that. Helen Joy said this before, that the constant rumination and obsession over it, and the fact that we actually hang transition, dangle it like a chain in front of them, I think that obsession over it means that it just gets worse and worse. I don't know if it's sort of also like if you're happily married, but you have a very high libido, and then you start thinking when you're in your mid 40s or whatever, you'll never have sex with another person. And instead of kind of owning up to your responsibility, staying grounded, reminding yourself of your responsibility to your family and sacrifice and like good qualities of masculinity in that way. Also the cost of giving into that desire of what it could have on your life. Maybe it's a little bit like that. And I think it is possible to deal with that, to deal with your libido and your desires and still be happy. Some men end up being kind of sex addicts and then they get treatment and they can overcome it. So maybe it's a little bit similar to that. Maybe it's a little bit similar to if you're married to someone and you have a weird fetish towards like leather or I don't know, something weird, and your spouse is not interested in doing that at all, finds it gross, doesn't want to entertain it, is more vanilla, whatever. Maybe it's a little bit similar to having to accept that you'll never get to experience that fetish properly unless you cheat and do it with a dominatrix or a prostitute or something. I would imagine there are lots of men in that position. I can see, being a man and knowing what male sexuality is like without going into too much detail, I can quite easily relate to the fact of there may be something that you like the idea of, but the more and more you give into it and obsess over it, and then if you go to porn and start watching loads of porn about it, I can see how it actually it can take over your life when it probably didn't need to. I think if you have the right sort of cognitive behavioral approach towards staying present and focusing on good things in your life and diverting attention away from that, maybe it is a bit similar to that. So perhaps I give autogynephilia too much credence, because sometimes I kind of think this is just an immutable sexuality. People with it are probably going to be miserable forever. They're never not going to want that. And there may be an element of they'll always have a bit of that desire, but I do think it's probably possible to manage it and to focus that attention elsewhere. Anyway, that was a long tangent. But in summary, he's not an Asian woman. He's a man with a sexual attraction towards being a woman. And that is okay as long as he doesn't harm people or force people to believe that he's a woman. But let's see what happens next.
Guess I was trying to fuck my way to the answer. And then I realized I gotta stop the drugs, the girls, trying to be a girl. I got into Buddhism, which is all about,
Interested where this is going.
spirit versus form, detaching from self, getting off the never-ending carousel of lust and suffering. Being sober isn't so hard. Being celibate, though, I still miss that pussy, man.
Yeah.
What a great scene. I think we need to get a screenshot of that guy's face and turn it into a meme. That moment you learned what autogynephilia is. I think this is a very, very interesting development, guys, in the trans discourse, because I've never seen something as blatant as this in a mainstream anything that is representing what autogynephilia is. And it makes me very curious to know what the intentions behind this were. Is it someone kind of fucking with us saying, we know why some people transition, we're kind of putting it in your face now? Was it written by someone who has experienced this and actually has no idea this has anything to do with trans? Was it written by a trans woman or one of these, sissy boy fetishists? There must be someone behind the writing of this that has experienced this desire, because how can you know it in such detail, such graphic detail, if you didn't experience it, or at least didn't extrapolate that experience from someone who has experienced it? Whether the writer was gender critical and they're actually just sliding this in there as a little hint to the people who are skeptical about this thing. I'm stumped as to kind of, obviously it's just a drama, so it's just a story, so it doesn't really have to have some political meaning. But so far, this has been something that no one wants to go near, even if they're not referring to trans, because the connection is quite easy to make. Even someone that's never heard about this could kind of ponder on that and think, oh, maybe that's a reason some men want to be women, and oh, that situation makes sense, and that situation makes sense. Very, very curious, and I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the series.